You don't want to be family. You got to have an asset that you can sell as you move on. What we buy you out. I mean, I'm just being realistic here, you guys.
I really just like me tons better not living with them. I loved the cul-de-sac. I felt like in the cul-de-sac, I was master over my own world. I was a mom. I was confident in being a mom. I want to do whatever I want in my home.
The books are finally out, and they're nothing short of stunning. Kody Brown's new best-selling memoir isn't merely spilling family drama. It's throwing open the curtains on a deliberate $200,000 Vegas fraud that'll make you fume. What appears on the surface to be family harmony in a polygamous home turns out to be nothing short of financial abuse and manipulation. And the evidence? It's all here. Kody's memoir, Sister Wives, a memoir of faith, family, and finding freedom, bookended onto store shelves at Barnes & Noble sooner than anticipated. Concealed in the 295 pages is a surprise that entirely rewrites what we believed we recognized of the Brown family's stint in Las Vegas. This isn't rumor. This isn't speculation. What Kody outlines is recorded betrayal, with cold, hard dollar signs to back it up. Here's the reality of what transpired. While Kody preached before the cameras about family unity during the Las Vegas years, he was quietly perpetrating one of the most duplicitous money grabs in reality TV history behind the scenes. As reported by Kody, Kody was not keeping the family together because he loved them. It was not about religion or even the spiritual connection he always used to make. Rather, she exposes that it was simple greed and the paycheck associated with the show. The Las Vegas move. It wasn't about new beginnings and greener pastures. It was an intentionally staged arrangement. Kody stringed along Meri and Janelle, pretending to care, while really setting them up as nothing but moneylenders. 4 women became walking ATMs, all while Kody and Robyn lived their true marriage behind the scenes. Kody puts it brutally honest. Kody had a pattern. He would be just enough for them to get pulled right back in, only to start pulling away all over again. That small flicker of hope was enough to keep the show running and money flowing. But then comes the part that ought to give pause to the heart of any woman who has ever trusted a partner with her financial security. Kody claims that Kody and Robyn did everything on purpose to manipulate Meri into believing there was still a glimmer of hope for reconciliation. Why? So they could get the money from her sale of the Las Vegas home. We're not talking pocket change here. We're talking about a woman's entire home equity, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, twisted and used as leverage through emotional manipulation. And it didn't just stop at Meri. Kody speaks of the same tactic with Janelle, the wife most frequently extolled as the business-savvy wife who controlled the family finances. It wasn't about missing Janelle as a partner, as far as Kody's actions were concerned, Kody insists. It was purely about getting his hands on her money. Each hug, each midnight conversation, each so-called romantic overture, Kody insists, had a price tag attached. The worst part of all this nonsense? Robyn was an accomplice from the start. Kody makes absolutely clear that Robyn had knowledge of this money scam and was more than okay with it because she was raking in money from it. While 3 women were being emotionally devastated and drained financially, Robyn was enjoying what Kody refers to as the ultimate betrayal, a typical monogamous marriage funded by polygamist money. This is not some reality show drama, ladies. This is a classic example of how financial predators operate. And all of it occurred on national television with millions of people watching 3 women pay for their own abuse and never even realize it. The show was nothing but a costly scam, and Kody just gave away all the dirty tricks they employed to do just that. What all of us believed we were seeing as Sister Wives was not real life. It was orchestrated theater meant to wring out as much profit as possible out of real family suffering. Kody reveals to us the astonished behind-the-scenes machine that enabled this deception. The Browns didn't only document family gatherings. They scripted out each plot before filming, typed out what they would respond with, and then performed it in front of the camera like actors reading from a script. 1 week shooting, 1 week off, with Kody and Robyn spending their time off thinking about what they'd tell in order to continue making money on their story. Here's where it gets totally insane. During filming, Kody, Meri, and Janelle were experiencing actual emotional breakdowns, confronting actual marriage issues, and coping with actual betrayal. But Kody and Robyn were acting like they're in a boardroom, deciding who was going to get the most sympathy for their prearranged storyline from the viewers in order to keep that TLC money coming. The fabricated dialogue wasn't even difficult to detect once you were aware of what you were looking for. Christine says in an article that when she and Kody broke up on television, the two of them had already had that very same conversation a number of times in their own home. Kody had already discovered the moving boxes in her garage. He already knew that she had packed his belongings away, but then he appeared on television looking shocked and devastated, playing the shocked husband for television, while Christine sat there and had to participate in this phony melodrama. Worse was the family gathering in which Christine broke the news that she was leaving. She had already phoned ahead to Meri and Janelle. She didn't want to surprise women whom she had known for decades, but when filming began, Meri was sitting there looking shocked and distraught, feigning it was fresh news. Christine watched that episode afterwards and understood Meri was actually acting out shock and betrayal for viewers. This is where the money manipulation turns downright sinister. Kody wasn't merely stringing these women along, he was staging their hope cycle against shooting seasons. He'd give them just enough attention to keep them hooked on the show, then withdraw his attention until the next season required drama. Their authentic suffering became his gain. And all the times Kody said he couldn't fly to be with his kids when there were medical emergencies? Christine spills the truth. He was juggling his brand, not his budget. When he wouldn't attend Isabel's surgery, saying he couldn't leave family for 3 weeks, he was actually thinking about how his absence would be perceived by viewers. And then when his other children arrived to stand by their sister, since apparently they understood family loyalty better than their dad, Kody was enraged at them for embarrassing him. The most heartbreaking part is realizing that while 3 women were pouring their hearts out on camera, sharing their most vulnerable moments with millions of strangers, Kody and Robyn were at home planning how to spin those confessions for maximum audience retention. Every tear was content. Every breakdown was a potential storyline. Every attempt at healing was just another opportunity to reset the manipulation cycle for the next season. The trail of money Christine exposes will leave every woman who has ever juggled a household budget utterly furious. We're not speaking here of typical marriage money disputes. This was systematic robbery dressed up as polygamous principles, and the trend is downright frightening. Christine reveals the Vegas bombshell that brings the whole Vegas operation crashing down. Kody conned each wife into bankrolling his lifestyle by promising reconciliation he never intended to keep. This was not polygamy. This was a multi-year financial swindle with 4 victims and 2 scammers, and the dollar figures are staggering. This is how the scam went down. Kody would rotate through his manipulative strategies based on whose bank account contained the most available money at the time. When Meri was sitting on her Vegas house equity, then Kody and Robyn are suddenly interested in getting things back together with her. When Janelle had business revenues rolling in, suddenly family sessions revolved around her being the financial pillar of the family. When Christine received her TLC income, there were all of a sudden discussions about reaffirming the family mission. But here's the part that should frighten every woman. These weren't arbitrary emotional mood swings. Christine divulges that Kody's interest tracked along with money in a scalpel-like precision. He would appear at Christine's doorstep commanding dinner to be prepared at 6 o'clock precisely, the house sparkling, the children in their best manners, but only when he required something from her. The instant her financial utility waned, so did his desire to continue even the facade of marriage. The Vegas real estate sales get even more sinister when you consider the timing. Every wife was coerced into selling their Las Vegas homes in the name of family harmony and relocating to Flagstaff. But Christine now uncovers that Dayton's college aspirations were merely convenient cover for a more extensive scheme of financial theft. The actual objective was to get every woman's house equity into a place where Kody could access or dictate how it was being used. Meri's case was especially harsh. Kody and Robyn specifically led Meri to believe that there was still a chance for reconciling in order to deceive her into handing over her home sale proceeds to family expenses that mainly benefited Kody and Robyn's household. We're dealing with a woman's entire housing investment being exploited against her through strategic emotional manipulation. The same dynamics unfolded with Janelle, but business-minded. The wife, who would have overseen family finances in a traditional relationship, Janelle symbolized constant access to diversified income sources. Kody's episodic reconciliation gestures towards Janelle were not about missing the partnership. They were about keeping access to her financial management expertise and her own separate sources of income. Even Christine's own income wasn't secure. She uncovers that money she made on the show was significantly smaller than what Kody and Robyn were getting, establishing a financial imbalance of power that made it more difficult for her to escape. Even after she acknowledged abuse, she was really paying her own exploitation while being lectured about how she wasn't pulling her weight enough to treat her as an equal. The psychological depth to this financial exploitation is appalling. Kody didn't merely take money, he made his wives thankful for the privilege of providing it for him, led them to believe they were investing in family security, and then penalized them when they began to wonder where their sacrifices were really being directed. Meri's home sale betrayal represents the most calculated financial predation in the entire Brown family saga. And when you see the psychological tactics involved, you'll recognize a blueprint that financial abusers use everywhere. This wasn't just theft. It was emotional terrorism with a six-figure price tag. Imagine being in Meri's shoes. She had been spiritually separated from Kody for years, a single woman in all but legal status, while still bound to a family that viewed her as an ATM with abandonment issues. Her Las Vegas house was her sole true financial independence, her way of escape, her security blanket in a dead marriage that expired years ago, and Kody and Robyn were keenly aware of how to use that vulnerability to their advantage. Christine discloses that the manipulation was cutthroat in its stealth. Just when Meri had to be making choices about her Vegas home, suddenly Kody and Robyn took an interest in fixing their relationship. Phone calls mounted, family meeting invitations materialized. There were calculated mentions of mending fences, of how much Meri meant to the family, of how they'd come to miss her input over the years. But this is the twisted psychology behind it. They weren't attempting to reform a marriage. They were orchestrating just enough emotional involvement to sway Meri's purse strings. Christine states that Kody and Robyn manipulated Meri into thinking they were going to have a chance at reconciliation, all so they could get their hands on the proceeds from her house sale. We're talking about possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars that are being stolen via pervasive emotional manipulation. Timing is everything. These reconciliation talks did not occur by chance. They actually overlapped ideally with Meri's property choices. When Meri had to choose whether to put her home value back into the household or to provide security for her own independent life, all of a sudden she was being wooed by a husband who had disregarded her for years and by a sister wife who had actually used her as competition. Meri fell for it because any woman who has been emotionally starved will reach out to sudden attention from the people she has spent decades trying to please. After years of being treated like she was replaceable, here were Kody and Robyn paying attention like she was important, like her voice mattered, like her presence was significant. Of course, she wanted to think it was real. But Christine recognized the act because she was watching the same maneuvering being done to her and Janelle. The attention was conditional, strategic, and always seemed to peak at the time of the big financial choices. When there was money involved for family members to add, their relationships with Kody became fine again. When their financial value decreased, so did his interest in showing even minimal courtesy. The most heartless aspect is the way they got Meri to be complicit in her own economic exploitation. By presenting the proceeds from home sale as a form of investment in family healing, they managed to convince her that making them available to her money was a gesture of love and devotion. She wasn't being stolen from. She was being a good sister wife, a loyal family member, a woman who was willing to make sacrifices for the greater good. And Robyn's part in this betrayal cuts the deepest of all. The wife who was supposed to have learned how to read Kody's moods, who played family translator and emotional broker, had unparalleled power over both Kody's choices and Meri's expectations. She could have shielded Meri, but instead, Christine claims she assisted in perpetrating the lie. This is financial abuse at its most sophisticated, using hope as a weapon, love as leverage, and family loyalty as camouflage for theft. Janelle's money manipulation unearths the most nefarious aspect of this whole scheme, because she was allegedly the business-savvy wife who ought to have known better. That's why Kody chose her, because he knew that her fiscal acumen made her the ideal long-term cash cow, and he manipulated her talent against her feelings with lethal accuracy. For 20 years, the financial pillar of the Brown family had been Janelle. She balanced budgets, managed expenses, made business decisions, and kept several households running on intricate income sources. She was the wife who knew about mortgage rates and tax considerations, who balanced the needs of 4 families against one common income. She ought to have been the most difficult to economically manipulate, but Kody knew just how to weaponize her competence against her. Anytime Janelle began to pull away emotionally, all of a sudden there were emergency family money meetings that needed her expertise. Anytime she began to find independence, all of a sudden Kody needed her advice about big money decisions that impacted everyone. He made her financial savvy a trap rather than an asset. Christine comes forward to say that Kody's overtures towards reconciliation with Janelle were as carefully planned as his manipulations of Meri, only business savvy this time. When Janelle had her own income coming in, either from real estate, business activity, or her share of TLC profits, all of a sudden Kody wanted to get back together and relaunch their union. When her financial input tapered off, so did his interest. The psychological manipulation in this instance is especially brutal because Janelle's self-worth was bound up with being economically beneficial to the family. She had worked for decades demonstrating her value through financial management and business sense. Kody took advantage of that pride by causing her to feel like remaining economically linked to him was the same as remaining valuable to the family structure. But that's where Christine's exposé becomes really devastating. Janelle's financial acumen was being utilized to bankroll her own emotional abuse. While she was doing the math to make family budgets function, Kody was doing the math to get the most out of her contribution while delivering the least in emotional investment. Her competence was the tool he used to abuse her. The Flagstaff to Vegas relocation is a classic example of this manipulation. Janelle handled the move like the businesswoman that she was, comparing prices, planning logistics, navigating the fiscal intricacy of relocating 4 families across state lines. But Christine discloses now that the whole move was staged with Dayton's college aspirations and Kody's hope to get more money from all the sale of wives' homes. Janelle was effectively project managing her own financial abuse. As she was keeping busy, ensuring that everyone's home sale and buying occurred in the right way, Kody and Robyn were planning how to tap and control those sale proceeds. She was fixing the logistical issues that enabled them to manipulate financially. More devious was the way in which Kody employed Janelle's financial acumen to justify his expectations on the other wives. When Christine or Meri queried lavish expenditures or budget priorities, Kody could cite Janelle's sanction as vindication. Janelle's financial skill became a guarantee that sheltered his money-making decisions from questioning, even when those decisions benefited first and foremost his household with Robyn. The fallout is what truly establishes the magnitude of this exploitation. When Janelle finally began putting her own children's interests ahead of family fiscal cohesion, when she started wondering why her contributions weren't being equated with her children receiving equal treatment, suddenly Kody's fascination with her business venture disappeared. As soon as she was no longer a subservient financial asset, she was disposable. The Flagstaff swindle unravels like the most meticulously planned real estate scheme you've ever witnessed. And when Christine reveals the true agenda behind that maneuver, every woman who has ever been coerced into making a significant financial choice for the family will understand the manipulation playbook. At first blush, the tale sounded near knightly. Dayton, Robyn's son, had a dream to go to college in Flagstaff, and the family had to move to facilitate his dreams of higher learning. Who wouldn't want to aid their child in continuing his education? Who wouldn't sacrifice for one of their own? It was the ideal cover tale for what Christine now discloses was a gargantuan wealth extraction scheme. That's the actual timeline Christine reveals. The Flagstaff relocation had nothing to do with Dayton's university prospects. It was more about coercing 4 women to sell their Vegas properties at the same time so Kody could tap into and control how that money was reinvested. We're talking about potentially more than $1 million in aggregate home equity being tapped all at once, with Kody set to control how that cash cycled back into family investments. The genius of using Dayton's college as justification is that it made questioning the move seem heartless. What kind of family member would oppose a child's education? What kind of woman would prioritize her own housing stability over a teenager's future? By framing the financial upheaval as family sacrifice for educational opportunity, Kody made it nearly impossible for any of the wives to object without looking selfish. But Christine wasn't fooled by the emotional blackmail because the arithmetic didn't work. To relocate 4 whole families from Las Vegas to Flagstaff, arrange for homes to be sold, deal with cross-state moves, set up new homes, cost orders of magnitude more than merely covering one college kid's tuition bills. If Dayton's education was the actual goal, there were scores of less invasive ways to address his college bills. The real agenda becomes crystal clear when you follow the money trail. Each wife was pressured to sell her Vegas property quickly, often at less than ideal market conditions, creating a sense of urgency that prevented careful financial planning. The simultaneous sales also meant none of them had time to research Flagstaff real estate thoroughly, making them dependent on Kody's guidance for their reinvestment decisions. And where was Kody placing those reinvestments? Mostly into property arrangements that suited his lifestyle with Robyn at the expense of placing the other wives in more and more vulnerable financial situations. Christine discloses that the real estate acquisitions in Flagstaff were not intended to replicate the Vegas situation in Nevada, in which each wife had guaranteed independent residence. Rather, they established a financial framework under which Kody could exert more control over all living arrangements for everyone. The psychological coercion was unrelenting. Any wife who wavered at the Flagstaff relocation was positioned as working against Dayton's educational prospects, being unwilling to accept family togetherness, or placing her comfort above group sacrifice. The emotional coercion created a situation in which it was almost impossible to voice sensible financial issues without appearing to be a bad member of the family. Even the timeline was suspect. The timing of Dayton's college enrollment created artificial urgency to make significant financial choices hastily. There was no time for careful planning, extensive research, or independent financial counsel. The wives were forced to rely on Kody's advice regarding Flagstaff real estate, property values, and investment policies, precisely the situation that put them most at risk of his manipulation. Christine's discovery that this was actually wealth extraction posing as family support should give every woman the heebie-jeebies. The deadliest financial predators don't make boasts about their intentions. They cover their exploitation with stories about love, sacrifice, and family dedication. Robyn's complicity in this economic manipulation eviscerates all the stories she has so meticulously woven to be the benevolent fourth wife who simply desired family harmony. Christine's disclosures reveal Robyn as the mastermind of emotional warfare, leveraging her status as Kody's favorite to engineer systemic theft from her sister wives. The most terrifying aspect of Christine's description isn't merely that Robyn was a part of the financial abuse, it's the way she used pretended concern to bring it about. Outwardly presenting herself as the family peacemaker, the one who grasped everybody's points of view and sought to assist Kody in being fair to all his wives, Robyn was secretly using those same discussions for her own financial gain. Christine describes in devastating detail how Robyn would say she could speak Kody as if wives who'd been with him for decades required a translator. But the translation was always one way. Robyn would manipulate Kody's actions towards the other wives, gather intel from interactions, then use that same information to position herself more favorably in money matters. This is where Robyn's manipulation really becomes sinister. She got the other wives to collude in paying for their own replacement, as Meri, Christine, and Janelle were sacrificing home sale proceeds and TLC profits to family costs. Robyn was enjoying an effectively monogamous marriage supported by polygamous earnings. She received the husband, financial security, and lifestyle, and her sister wives received broken promises and thinning bank accounts. The information collection was methodical and vicious. Christine discloses that her talks with Robyn on set would become manipulated and fed back to Kody, frequently with intentional misrepresentation that painted Christine negatively. Each confidence Christine expressed, each vulnerability, each effort at sister-wife connection was used as fuel that Robyn exploited in order to turn Kody against Christine. But Robyn's master move was making this treachery seem altruistic. She framed her intrusiveness in Kody's other marriages as attempting to help him be a better husband to all of them. She set up her spying as being concerned about family peace. She showed her monetary manipulation as wanting to ensure everyone was treated equally. The gaslighting was so high-tech that even Christine at first thought Robyn was attempting to assist. The financial side shows Robyn's real priorities in stark terms. Christine claims that Robyn was totally comfortable with the financial exploitation of the other wives because she was profiting from it, while Meri was being taken advantage of out of proceeds from her home sale, while Janelle was being employed as a money manager for herself to be exploited, while Christine was making less money on the show for being a key player. Robyn was enjoying the lifestyle that their collective efforts provided for. Worse still, Robyn knowingly kept stringing the other wives along with false promises just to have access to their monetary contributions. Christine breaks the secret that what she and Kody were engaging in wasn't polygamy at all, but a monogamous marriage that was subsidized by 3 women who were being hoodwinked into thinking that they still had hope for reconciliation. The most brutal irony of all is that Robyn never lived polygamy herself at all. She received sole access to Kody's time, attention, and affection, while her sister wives received the occasional visits made to keep them financially committed. She lived marriage while they lived exploitation, but their finances paid for her security. Christine's discovery that Robyn actually never experienced polygamy because she and Kody were merely stringing along the others for a life of luxury at their expense is the ultimate betrayal. Robyn was able to play house with a dedicated husband as Meri, Christine, and Janelle financed that fantasy through their own personal and financial devastation. This is not about money. It's about exploiting sisterhood as cover for thievery, weaponizing women's relationships to facilitate financial exploitation, and reducing the institution of plural marriage to a high-end game of deception. The fame addiction element lays bare the most horrible truth of all. Kody's desperation to secure his reality television earnings turned him from a flawed husband into an outright money predator who would jeopardize his own children's well-being for cash flow and camera time. Christine exposes how Kody's relationship with fame became a toxic feedback loop that made him increasingly dangerous to everyone around him. Once the TLC paycheck started flowing and he tasted celebrity, every family decision became filtered through one question: how will this affect the show? Not how will this affect my wives? Not how will this affect my children, but how will this impact my ability to keep making money from our family trauma? Christine's psychological change should strike fear into the heart of anyone who has ever witnessed someone they care about become fixated on outside opinions. Kody became hooked on reading things written about him online, becoming actually angry when fans criticized the way he was acting, and more paranoid about who among the family members was making him appear bad to the fans. His ego became totally reliant on an outside opinion, but rather than working on his behavior, he chose to manipulate his family's reactions. That's where the fame addiction crossed the line into abuse. Kody began employing loyalty tests to see which of his wives and kids were standing behind his public persona and which were rendering him guilty. When Christine criticized their marriage on the show, Kody punished her and her kids by completely cutting them out. If the children were not acting happy for the cameras, Kody would fault their moms for failing to control the family image adequately. Christine discloses that Kody started using words he never used before, terms such as covenant and agreement, as if his wives had signed an agreement under which his word was law and their role was guarding his image. The religious context was reduced to being a tool to enforce obedience to his image management requirements instead of a religious basis for familial relationships. The saddest instance Christine recounts is Isabel's surgery scenario. When Kody did not go to New Jersey for his daughter's surgery, saying he could not leave his family for 3 weeks, he was actually doing math regarding how long his absence would make him appear bad to viewers. But when Hunter and Aspen came to stand up for their sister because they truly grasped family commitment, Kody became indignant at them for making him seem worse by comparison. Consider the psychological harm here. Kody cared more about his public reputation than his child's health emergency, then resented his other children for showing him the parental affection he did not bother to have for them. Fame addiction had thoroughly perverted his sense of what was really his duty as a father and a husband. The economic motivation made things worse because every wife's emotional distress directly mapped into content worth. Their actual marriage issues, their actual heartbreak, their real efforts to recover, everything was material for storylines that were worth money. Kody had an economic motivation to make his wives unhappy enough to produce drama, but hopeful enough to remain on the show. Christine's admission that arguments would be restaged for cameras demonstrates the extent to which this exploitation became calculated. Their actual breakup dialogue occurred several times in secret, but then had to be restaged for TLC's cameras as well. Their genuine family disagreements were reformatted as content with everyone required to get their emotional beats down on schedule for the benefit of Kody's paycheck. The greed was so intense that Kody was ready to relocate his entire family state to state, ruin 4 households, and swindle his wives out of hundreds of thousands in home equity just to make the show interesting. The Flagstaff relocation wasn't about family necessities. It was about generating new storylines that would be worthy of continued TLC contracts. Most appalling of all is how the fame addiction turned Kody more and more abusive as he grew more desperate to hold on to control of his cash cow. When wives began questioning the financial deals or asking for fairer treatment, Kody's action wasn't to look at his actions. It was to become more manipulative, more controlling, more apt to sacrifice anyone who cut into his income stream. Christine's wake-up call is the point at which a woman will finally perceive the price tag on her own dignity, and her choice to cease subsidizing her own abuse should be an inspiration to every woman who has ever felt trapped by another's money control. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It was exhaustingly practical. Christine realized she was paying money to be treated badly, contributing her earnings to a system that deliberately kept her miserable and subsidizing a lifestyle for Kody and Robyn, while her own children watched their mother being systematically devalued. The math finally didn't make sense, even from an emotional investment standpoint. Christine recalls when she became fed up with watching what she said, fed up with playing the game, fed up with doing gratitude for crumbs of attention that she was literally paying for in her TLC pay. She was paying for her own emotional terrorism and being informed she wasn't giving enough to earn common respect. The ridiculousness became unacceptable. The financial wake-up call was harsh, but illuminating. Christine was making significantly less money from the show than Kody and Robyn for appearing in storylines that attracted millions of viewers. She was acting out her most intimate moments for viewers and getting a smaller share of the take than the man who was losing her. She was literally paying to be embarrassed on TV. But the deeper learning was yet more destructive. She was teaching her children that love entails financial sacrifice, that family is loyalty in the form of accepting abuse, and that women should be thankful for whatever attention they can purchase. Her daughters saw their mother pay for her own abuse and were learning this was the model of marriage. Her sons were learning that this is how men treated women who loved them. Christine's choice to depart wasn't solely about the breakdown of her marriage. It was about not complying with the script that her suffering was profitable material. She wasn't going to fake anymore that there was a chance for reconciliation simply so Kody could continue milking their relationship issues for TLC checks. She wasn't going to stage fake dialogue for cameras, while her actual emotional needs went entirely unfulfilled. The bravery it took to leave that economic manipulation behind is impossible to overestimate. Christine was departing not only a husband, but a whole economic system that had been built on her involvement. The show required her vulnerability, required her tears and hopes and letdowns to create viewer involvement. Without wives who would act out their heartbreak, Kody's money machine would fail. Christine's decision to stop funding the dream that she and Kody could make their marriage work dismantled the entire financial model that had been milking her for years. No longer home sale proceeds entering accounts controlled by Kody. No longer TLC profits used to fund lifestyle expenses that benefited his relationship with Robyn most of all. No longer emotional labor for cameras without actual relationship investment coming back in return. Her emancipation in making this choice is deep. Christine opted for financial independence in choosing to ignore the illusory security of being part of a system that would never value her health. She determined that financial self-responsibility was better than being financially taken advantage of by someone who professed to love her. But most compellingly, Christine's exit uncovered the entire enterprise for what it truly was. When she no longer played along in Kody's cash-generating script, the manufactured quality of the whole scenario could no longer be kept secret. Without a wife who would enact hope and disappointment at the push of a button, the very premise of the show that this was a family operating together to overcome obstacles unraveled entirely. Christine's wake-up call should ring loud with every woman who has ever paid for her own abuse. Sometimes the most revolutionary act of self-love is just no longer paying for abuse. Sometimes the greatest danger to a financial predator is a woman who determines that her peace is more valuable than their profit margins. The empire begins to fall when the underpinnings of exploitation finally collapse. And the legal repercussions of Christine's financial discoveries might redefine how we think about economic abuse in plural marriage arrangements forever. What Christine has chronicled is more than reality TV melodrama. It's possible evidence of systematic financial deception that took advantage of religious faith and family dynamics to move money from several women to a pair of individuals. Legal professionals who handle cases of financial abuse are familiar with these patterns: the isolation, the fabricated sense of urgency surrounding significant financial decisions, the emotional manipulation scheduled to occur in sync with the sale of property, and the intentional creation of financial dependence masquerading as family harmony. The civil ramifications alone are mind-boggling. If Christine's claims regarding the defalcation of Meri's home sale proceeds hold up, we're talking about possible claims of financial elder abuse, undue influence, and conversion of assets. when a person uses emotional manipulation to direct another's financial choices for that person's advantage, particularly in a relationship where trust and dependency exist, that ventures into the area of moral failure becoming legal responsibility. The chronology Christine offers makes what attorneys refer to as a paper trail of intent. The synchronized attention that coincided with both wives' significant financial decisions, the tactical reconciliation efforts coordinated with property sales, the fabricated family crises demanding on-the-spot cash injections, all of these demonstrate a pattern of purposeful financial exploitation and not arbitrary marital breakdown. But the greatest legal risk would be from the show itself. If TLC profits were shared disproportionately while everyone was contributing on equal terms to the content creation, if wives were coerced into doing emotional labor for cameras with disproportionately low payoffs, if the money arrangements were misrepresented to cast members, these could amount to breach of contract, fraudulent inducement, or even employment law violations. The IRS implications also warrant consideration. When money from joint ventures, such as reality shows, is shared unequally, when relatives contribute to joint expenses without receiving equivalent tax benefits, when property is transferred under duress instead of fair market exchanges, tax authorities take an interest, particularly when figures involved exceed 6 figures. For the rest of the Brown family relations, Christine's financial revelations initiate a chain reaction that makes future exploitation almost impossible. Meri and Janelle now possess a documented handbook of exactly how their feelings and finances were manipulated. They can identify the patterns, see the strategies, and safeguard themselves against future attempts to gain access to their assets using promises of false reconciliation. The worst effect may be felt by Kody and Robyn in their capacity to sustain their way of life. The entire financial model was built on having more women paying towards common bills with only a single couple enjoying the main perks. Without Christine and her public accusations, that model is no longer viable, practically or legally. Upcoming TLC negotiations will also be made more difficult by Christine's disclosures regarding unequal pay and manufactured storylines. Reality TV contracts usually contain clauses regarding genuine portrayal and equitable pay for all participants. If the network knew storylines were being made up and pay being uneven, their own legal liability could be substantial. But most significant of all is the preventive legal implication. Christine's bravery in reporting and revealing this economic abuse provides a model for other women to identify economic abuse in their own relationships. Her clear explanation of how predatory financiers utilize religious power, familial allegiance, and emotional manipulation to tap into women's wealth could help save other families from such exploitation. The sister wives community that once mobilized around the Browns' TV portrayal is now grappling with the fact that their own romanticized vision of plural marriage was really a sophisticated economics con game. That disillusionment opens up space for frank discussions about how financial abuse works in religious communities and what legal protections could be needed. Here we are, seeing the fallout from what happens when a woman determines her dignity is more valuable than someone else's bottom line. Christine's financial disclosures don't merely reveal one family's sickness. They shed light on how sophisticated financial abusers play the game and why their victims' willingness to come forward literally keeps other women safe from becoming prey. What's going to happen when Meri and Janelle figure out the extent to which their trust and money were played? And what legal outcome has you wishing Christine gets the justice she deserves? Tap like, hit subscribe, keep notifications on for all the updates. As this financial fraud story continues to unravel, a fresh video is already queued up, and something tells me the next round of legal revelations will be even more explosive than Christine's book bombshells.